Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going to talk about something really fascinating. It's a part of history that gives us a completely different way to think about gender. A story that was almost lost, but is now being brought back to light.
Most of us grow up thinking there are pretty much two options, male or female. But what if that wasn't the whole story? What if, for centuries, some cultures saw gender as something way bigger, way more spiritual than that?
And that's where we're going to start. Let's dive into what the term two-spirit actually means, because it really challenges that simple two-box idea of gender.
So what exactly is two-spirit? Well, it's a modern English term that was actually created back in 1990. It was made by Native people, for Native people, to describe individuals in their communities who don't really fit into Western labels like gay or transgender. It's kind of like an umbrella term that connects who they are today with a really long and important history.
Let's break that down a little. At its heart, two-spirit describes a person who holds both a masculine and a feminine spirit. And this is super important. It's not about who a person is attracted to. It's about their spiritual identity and the special role they have in their community. It's an identity that really only makes sense inside of Native cultures.
So what was that role? This is where the story gets really incredible. Because for many, many cultures, being two-spirit meant you held a place of deep honor and respect.
Get this. In hundreds of Native nations all across North America, way before Europeans arrived, two-spirit people weren't just, tolerated, they were revered. They were seen as a bridge between our world and the spirit world, like they had a special balance and a deeper kind of wisdom because they held two spirits inside them.
And they were absolutely essential. They were often the community's healers and visionaries. They were matchmakers. They were entrusted with caring for children and, maybe most importantly, with keeping the tribe's sacred traditions and stories alive. They were woven right into the fabric of the community.
But then, everything changed. That honored place in society came under a direct and brutal attack. This led to a history that was very deliberately and tragically erased. And the term that historians and Native people use to describe what happened is intense, a cultural genocide. When European colonizers and churches showed up, they brought these really rigid ideas about gender and sexuality. They saw these traditions as a threat, something that had to be completely stamped out.
I mean, the shift was just so dramatic. For centuries, you have two-spirit people as a respected, integral part of their cultures. Then, starting in the 1500s, this systematic effort begins to shame, to punish, and to completely wipe out these identities. The violence and forced assimilation left this deep, deep wound that people are still dealing with today.
And that brings us to the present. The fight today isn't just about digging up old history. It's about dealing with the very real, modern consequences of that erasure.
Just think about it for a second. When you lose generations of your own knowledge, outside ideas start to fill in the gaps. Some of the very views that were forced on Native people, like strict gender roles and the idea that same-sex relationships are wrong, started to take root in some communities.
And this isn't some abstract idea from the distant past. A really powerful, painful example of this conflict happened pretty recently, in 2005.
So in that year, the government of the Navajo Nation, a people with their own rich traditional history of multiple genders, passed a law that banned same-sex marriage. And as you can imagine, it created this incredibly painful debate among their own people. So you're left with this heartbreaking contradiction. On one side, you have the traditional view where gender diversity and the relationships of two-spirit people were respected, and on the other, you have a modern law that reflects the exact same colonial values that were used to try and destroy their culture in the first place. Today, there's a fight led by young Navajo activists to repeal that law.
And that kind of leaves us with a final question to chew on. This isn't just a story about the past, right? It's about identity, it's about resilience, and it's about the incredible power of history to shape our world right now. So, knowing that gender diversity was once honored and celebrated in so many places, how does that change the way we look at today's debates and our own definitions of who we are? It's definitely something to think about. Thanks for joining me for this explainer.